whatever part of your soul, whatever part of your core that identifies as naturalist, and when it reads something that makes naturalist sense, whatever part of your core is that recognizes naturalism as truth, I would be curious if reading those 3 books, if that core of yours isn't somehow triggered or awakened, because for me it is. And I love the fact that God often operates by natural laws, and that doesn't mean he ceases to be God. It means that nature is one of the ultimate manifestations thereof. In fact, the Book of Mormon, in the Book of Alma, it says all things denote that there is a God. The planets in their orbits and all of the nature around us testify to the fact there is a God. And Joseph Smith, before E equals MC squared, before Schrodinger's cat, before Albert Einstein, literally predicted entropy, the physical and naturalistic phenomenon of entropy, the loss of heat in chemical transactions. He says, in the end, when the earth is literally folded as a scroll under, quote, fervent heat, because he saw a vision of the end times. When you study entropy, you know that the world's probably going to end somewhere at like 600 degrees Kelvin or whatever the scientists have calculated the end of the Big Bang to finally result in. And that is a naturalistic manifestation of what our spiritual leader saw. So the scientific truth, which if based upon scientific observation will be a naturalistic truth, okay, is correctly mirrored in modern scripture that predated its natural discovery, but they're saying the exact same thing. It is the most wild naturalistic high that you can get. And I would be curious if you experience that. Now, who knows? Maybe you read it and you're like, this is all overrated. But if you read that and that core of you that likes naturalism senses something, then to me, that's the ultimate test right there. And I would be curious, as an obviously intellectually honest person, what your take back is, because you're not going to lie to me. You're not going to give me fluff and say, oh, dude, I love this. You know what I'm saying? But you're also not going to come out here and say, oh, this was garbage. And let me tell you why. My pastor says, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. You're probably one of the only truly intellectually honest inquisitors I've met all year. Okay.
I'm sorry. And that's terrible.
We live in a divided world, man. I would be deeply curious to see what you thought after you read those books. And since it takes time to read books and it's a burden when somebody asks you to read them, I'm going to buy them for you so that I can at least relieve you of the burden of the $25 they cost.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you.
I veer verbose, dude. I apologize. I should have told you that.
No, that's perfect.
By the way, you're super nice, dog. Like, I'm used to debating with people where they say, like, it's so funny because, like, there was a couple times where like, well, so you believe, and then you stop yourself and be thinking. And so usually when people say, so you believe, they're about to insert a heinous straw man here. That's like a 300-year-old false accusation of the church that they learned from their pastor because they hate us. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? We've been doing a lot of debates with like these Christians that come after us a lot lately. So it's kind of funny. You're actually I think you're the first person I've met that's just been an honest inquisitor in a long time. And that's good on you. That's good on you. You know?
Well, I try well, first of all, I want to admit my ignorance where it's at. And I know very, very little about the Church of Jesus Christ. And you know, I also teach philosophy. So if I was ever going to straw man somebody, I would just be committing a mortal sin against myself.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to live with myself. But yeah, if you ever have the want, need, or desire to have a philosophy teacher on, I'll extend the offer.
Actually, you know, it'd be kind of interesting. I wish I would have known you were a philosophy teacher a year ago, because when we do have debates, I would be curious. This is something I might invite you on my show for one of these times. Whenever we're debating, especially ex-members of our church, the Church of Wokeism, the cult of academia, is the new modern state religion in the new Babylon. Like people think that they fled dogmatic Dark Ages faith to the enlightenment of scientific reason, not realizing that it's science TM, and science doesn't mean what you saw on TV. You know what I'm saying? And right now, our biggest philosophical battles, previously, our biggest, like when you said an anti-Mormon, like when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, if you said, oh, you know, I'm going to read an anti-Mormon book, it was generally a Christian book from a different sect that was writing a spirit piece or a hit piece against Mormons and saying like, oh, well, the book of Revelation says that there shall be no thing added or taken away from this book, and this means that they're in violation, blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? And anti-Mormons were generally other Christians. Now, anti-Mormonism is predominantly very atheistic, very cynical, very secular, and popularized, if not by mainstream popular secularists and atheists, by ex-members of the church getting big-time internet clout. I'd probably say the top 5 YouTube anti-Mormon podcasters that we deal with are all ex-members of the faith, and they're super toxic. And the reason I say it would be interesting to have you on is because your ignorance to the specifics of the Mormon church actually could be very useful, because all the time they say, no, you're straw manning me. And by straw man, they mean you just said something true that they don't like. And they always say, oh, the Mormon church is gaslighting us. And by gaslighting, they mean just saying obvious truths that they don't like. You know what I'm saying? And the abuse of these terms, these philosophical terms, of philosophical fallacies, has just literally gotten out of control. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I actually think it would be very humorous to just have you as a layman, a third party. Like, for example, here's one that happened just the other day. And I know you got to go, so I won't spend up too much of your time.
But I got all night. It's okay.
But right now, a big thing they're pushing is that if you're a member of the Mormon church, you're anti-gay, you're anti-trans, you're anti-LGBTQ. And that flies completely in the face of everything I just told you. No matter who they are, and no matter how God made them, they are made in his image. And whether they're gay or whether they're straight, they are my brother, and they deserve and demand that respect. In order to respect them, I don't have to condone everything they're doing. We can hate sins and love sinners simultaneously, just as God does, okay? But no, I love this person. I don't hate this person. But all the time they say that, like, oh, if you're Mormon, you know, you're anti-gay. And it's this cruel smear that has become a huge division in families, in the social fabric, in American society at large, right? And we had a beloved apostle of our church, one of the top 12 leaders of our church, just this year go up and give a speech at BYU, which is our probably our flagship university, okay? And he told the staff at BYU, it was a speech that wasn't to the general populace. It was a speech directed generally at teachers and professors and administrators of Brigham Young University. And he said, look, you guys have a sacred duty. You are teaching both spiritual and secular knowledge. You're much like the pioneers who built the first temple. They had a trowel in the left hand and a musket in the right hand. They used the trowel to lay the mortar and bricks of the temple, and the musket to defend from the mobs that were attacking the Mormon church. You hold the sacred duty of both building the kingdom and informing the people of secular and spiritual truths, all right? And then he took it one step further and he said, you know, I've seen plenty of building. I'd like to hear more musket fire, which is an obviously, I would say, poetic and beautiful metaphor, a beautiful analogy, dare I say parable, okay, of how we should simultaneously build and defend the kingdom, right?
Yeah.
That same week, The Advocate and every single anti-Mormon podcaster and every ex-Mormon, anti-Mormon, or progressive Mormon at the Washington Post, New York Times, and all of the above writes all of these massive headlines. Mormon church advocates for violence with rifles against gay members of the church. Next headline, Mormon church advocates for the shooting behind the chapel of trans members. And all of these heinous accusations come out, and now that like exists in the zeitgeist. And it's one of these weird things that we have to defend. Like, do you really think that trans people should be shot? And it's like, no, No, and the people that are propagating this are saying that, oh, they're right. But when we come out, we say, no, this is a fulfillment of Scripture. Anti-Mormons never refute Scripture. They always fulfill it. And when the book of Isaiah says that you will be made a criminal and an offender for a word, they're literally referencing the cancel culture you're engaged in right now. And I would actually call you under repentance and say that what you're doing is divisive in your family. It's divisive in our society at large. It's divisive in the church. And it is a sin and you should stop. Well, that's a straw man. You're gaslighting me. You're that. So I would love to have a philosopher come on and say, like, is what the advocate said. I'd love to be able to say, yo, Michael Granado, you're a philosopher teacher. Is this a fair representation of our faith based off of what you just saw? And it'd be hilarious just to have you either say like, see where I'm coming from. You know what I'm saying? Or just to say like, no, that's absolute garbage. You'd be a very hilarious arbiter in this. And the fact that you don't know much about the church and you're just a nice guy from the South, like that actually could work, dude. I think that'd be great content, man.
So, I'll tell you a little bit about myself because I don't want you to think that I'm trying to like mislead you or dissuade you or anything of that nature. So I was a Christian for a while. I won't tell you my entire life story here. I'm not a Christian anymore. I was vaguely familiar with the LDS Church because, again, the churches I grew up with, the presentation that I got of Mormons is that, and again, this is like Southern, like, we're outside of the church and we're crapping on people. Okay.
I grew up next to Grace Baptist Church, and I've got many good friends that go there, and they don't behave this way. But there were posters on the wall of why Islam is incorrect, with all the scriptures referencing the false beliefs of Islam. Why Catholicism is incorrect, with about 30 scriptures referencing why they're wrong. And then there was like 2 posters for why Mormons are incorrect. So I get there's an ethos there. And by the way, that ethos, though, to me is very economical. The Mormon church converted entire congregations in the South. Like a pastor would convert and would tell his congregation to convert, and then they would all move to Zion as they perceived it in Nauvoo or later on in Salt Lake City. And you would have a church congregation that would just pack up its bags and leave out west with the Mormon pioneers because they had a vision, a personal conviction. They had been converted. And in order to stop that, many of the North American churches, actually, it's hilarious. Do I have it in here? I just bought on eBay one of the first anti-Mormon tracts. It's a pamphlet that still hasn't been cut. They used to print pamphlets with small parts of the page and then fold it up, staple it, and then cut the edges. I have one of the pamphlets where it's still fresh enough off the press that they didn't cut the edge of the pamphlets. That's like Mormonism versus science, and it's from like the 1870s or something like that. And they started creating in a mad dash a bunch of these anti-Mormon arguments. And it's really funny. I can tell oftentimes where somebody's coming from spiritually or socially just by the arguments they make against my faith, because the most hurried, rushed, and easy to disprove ones are actually some of the first ones we get and the oldest ones, because they were made in a rush by the North American churches that wanted to stop the bleeding. We just had 150 tithe paying people leave the congregation in Tennessee and move out west to Nauvoo with the Mormons. We got to stop the bleeding. You, Josiah over there, you need to write a pamphlet that we just start disseminating far and wide in order to stop this bleeding. I mean, it's nuts. Like the first anti-Mormon book was written only 7 years after Joseph Smith started the church.
Yeah, the church I went to wasn't that bad, but it was still this assumption. I mean, I guess what it really boils down to is the idea that Christianity's intimately linked with the idea of the Trinity. So even there were a couple of evangelical denominations like Oneness Pentecostals deny the Trinity, and they were kind of like, marginalized, pushed off to the side. It wasn't like anybody was actively hated them or anything, but it was like,
they're the redheaded stepchild of all the North American faiths. I had 3 Pentecostal ministers in here talking about, not ministers, but members talking about the great apostasy. They're some of the nicest men that aren't of my faith that I can have debates with. And they're wildly ecumenical, very kind. I think some of the creeds affected them too. And I think Mormonism can improve upon that faith structure. But I am in awe at how Christ-like they live their lives and interact with people like us. And yeah, it's hilarious. They're absolutely besmirched by like the people at the Master's College, only like 5 miles from my studio. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy. So anyway, I interrupted you. Keep going. I apologize.
No. I was just going to say, yeah, I'm more than... I love having these conversations. Like, this is what I would be doing in my free time, which is why I started getting more involved on YouTube. But yeah, I'm more than happy to have these conversations. So I am almost done. I'm working on my PhD in philosophy. I specialize in the history and philosophy of science. So, and I teach history and I teach philosophy, depending on the school. But yeah, I love talking about this stuff. I'm not super great at argumentation. I know the basics because I have to teach critical thinking. But yeah, if you ever want to do that, I would also like to maybe have you all back on eventually, have you back on eventually, especially if I get a lot of questions and feedback from my students. But I'm also a naturalist. Mm-hmm. I don't really like the label. So here's the thing. I don't like new atheism.
Oh, yeah. No,
and I hate the way that people talk to each other online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's
so
everything the Christian right was, everything annoying about the radical Christian right in the 1980s is what new atheism is. By the way, if atheism were correct in the scientific approach to life, why would you need a new version of it 10 years later? It's just, I get where you're coming from. So anyway, keep going. You don't like new atheism, but...
Yeah, I would consider myself a naturalist. So I don't want you to again, I'm more than happy to talk about these things, but I don't want you to think that I'm trying to deceive you about what I think and what I believe. Right. I don't really talk about that on my YouTube channel. So
no, there is absolutely nothing about your demeanor that comes off as deceptive. So don't worry. I do not at all think you're being deceptive. And actually, one thing comes to mind. I'm sure you get told to read books often, and I'm not going to bore you with telling you another book you should read. But if you're a philosophy guy and you're really into it, I would be extremely curious, especially if you were interested in kind of what I said about the great apostasy. You have to read a book called All Things New. And it's by a duo of authors called Terrell and Fiona Givens. They're probably the best thing to those scholars you said you were looking for. And their book, All Things New, tracks early Christianity through the great apostasy into the restoration and really outlines how that you're a naturalist, I would bet, because that's what at your core seems to work. Naturalism is why Christianity came up with the scientific method, because they saw that God operates through laws, and naturally those laws benefit us. And naturally, a Father in heaven that loves us, who is a corporeal God who wants to see our progress, would give us laws as a gift to help us. Therefore, what else in the natural world is governed by laws? We must investigate these laws, define these laws, and codify these laws. The scientific method itself is a result of an enlightenment in Christianity. You know what I'm saying? And it speaks to us, and it's the safe place for intelligent people like yourself, because the dogma of the Trinity, if you read the Nicene Creed, it makes no sense. That God is in all things and above all things. He is a Trinity that is everywhere, but also simultaneously nowhere. Having a body of all things, but in no things. It's like, what? And one of my comedian friends says, the Athanasian Creed, just forget it. He calls it the religious Gaston song. No one runs like our God. No one, is great like our God. No one does anything else as good as our God. It's these things don't resonate with us in our core as much as naturalism does. So what I would encourage you to do, if there's any aspect of you that likes pursuing anything it perceives as a greater truth or the truth with a capital T or whatever, which is what your desire of philosophy is based on, I would encourage you, take a peep at the Book of Mormon, take a peep at Terrell and Fiona Given's book. I'm telling you, this is something that can be done in an afternoon. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't need to climb to a top of some mountain. And
what's the author's name again?
Terrell and Fiona Givens.
Terrell.
Terryl and Fiona, just like Princess Fiona in Shrek. Okay. Who I found out the other day has a British accent. You can get her book on Audible and it sounds like some babe that looks like Elizabeth Hurley is just reading you spiritual fodder. So it's kind of a trip. It's funny. But anyway, if you just read Terrell and Fiona Givens, they make a beautiful book called The God Who Weeps. The philosopher in you might love that book. And then if you like the apostasy, I would read All Things New. And then read the Sermon on the Mount as given in the Americas in 3rd Nephi chapter 11. I will literally, if you just text me your address, I will give you all 3 of these books personally. You don't even have to go buy them. That will be my gift to you. Philosophy is not the most lucrative of professions. So this will be, you don't have to pay the $24.95 for the hardcover. I will literally just give you those books.
I do have a company credit card, so.
Hey, well then either way, Terrell and Fiona Givens are getting a royalty. But I don't
want you to buy the books unless you already have them.
I'll get you. I'll get you them, dog. Don't sweat it. I'll get them.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
And please don't be taken aback by my address. It starts with 666. It's not.
No, to me that's just awesome, and I will take a picture of that. And their son actually just wrote a book. Their son is kind of becoming a little bit of an author too, kind of like Tom Hanks' kid. Ended up becoming an actor just like Tom Hanks is. Their son just wrote a book, and I'm going to be talking with him about his book on faith.
Cool.
That's actually pretty interesting as well. These aren't long. Like the New York Times writes for generally a 5th grade audience. These Terrell, especially Fiona Givens, she has a big vocabulary, but it's not inaccessible. They're easy reads, and the feedback I would like to get from you after this is I'm not just pushing some book on you because I'm like, you got to read this book, like it's because I would be very curious as a man who says, I self-declare as a naturalist because that's what sits right to me. Whatever part of your soul, whatever part of your core that identifies as naturalist, and when it reads something that makes naturalist sense, whatever part of your core is that recognizes naturalism as truth, I would be curious if reading those 3 books, if that core of yours isn't somehow triggered or awakened, because for me it is. And I love the fact that God often operates by natural laws, and that doesn't mean he ceases to be God. It means that nature is one of the ultimate manifestations thereof. In fact, the Book of Mormon, in the Book of Alma, it says all things denote that there is a God. The planets in their orbits and all of the nature around us testify to the fact there is a God. And Joseph Smith, before E equals MC squared, before Schrodinger's cat, before Albert Einstein, literally predicted entropy, the physical and naturalistic phenomenon of entropy, the loss of heat in chemical transactions. He says, in the end, when the earth is literally folded as a scroll under, quote, fervent heat, because he saw a vision of the end times. When you study entropy, you know that the world's probably going to end somewhere at like 600 degrees Kelvin or whatever the scientists have calculated the end of the Big Bang to finally result in. And that is a naturalistic manifestation of what our spiritual leader saw. So the scientific truth, which if based upon scientific observation will be a naturalistic truth, okay, is correctly mirrored in modern scripture that predated its natural discovery, but they're saying the exact same thing. It is the most wild naturalistic high that you can get. And I would be curious if you experience that. Now, who knows? Maybe you read it and you're like, this is all overrated. But if you read that and that core of you that likes naturalism senses something, then to me, that's the ultimate test right there. And I would be curious, as an obviously intellectually honest person, what your take back is, because you're not going to lie to me. You're not going to give me fluff and say, oh, dude, I love this. You know what I'm saying? But you're also not going to come out here and say, oh, this was garbage. And let me tell you why. My pastor says, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're probably one of the only truly intellectually honest inquisitors I've met all year. Okay.
I'm sorry.
And
that's terrible.
We live in a divided world, man. I would be deeply curious to see what you thought after you read those books. And since it takes time to read books and it's a burden when somebody asks you to read them, I'm going to buy them for you so that I can at least relieve you of the burden of the $25 they cost.
Okay, I'll let you do that. I don't like when people buy stuff for me, but that's my own personal problem. I'll text you my address. My phone died as we were talking, but I'll text it to you, and I'm more than happy. Maybe we can talk about that later. I got some time off, so. Yeah,
bummer you're not in Los Angeles, man. I'd take you shooting or something. I can't take you to go have a beer because I'm Mormon, but I'd buy you a case of 9mm, and we'd unload some hot lead at the range or something,
I don't drink anymore, so occasionally, but not regularly.
Now. Well, dude, this has been righteous. I'm going to post this. Even our recent conversation we just had right now, I absolutely loved. This is a couple of podcasts, and I've deeply enjoyed this. I thank you for inviting me. Anytime you want to come on my show, come on. I'll probably reach out to you. You feel free to reach out to me anytime. We're buddies now. We're buddies.
Awesome.
Dude. Okay.
Well, no, I really enjoyed it as well. And again, thank you. I'll probably post this on my channel I don't know what today is. Probably at least by Monday. Yeah.
Cool. Rock on, man. I look forward to it. So thanks, man. I will catch you later.
Awesome.
Okay, see ya. Hey guys, Cardinellis here. I am the creator of Midnight Mormons, and first I'd like to say thank you for watching this video. We know in an attention economy, there's all kinds of podcasts and shows you could be keeping up with, and you chose to be here with us. That means a lot. Thank you. If you haven't had a chance yet, please consider contributing to the channel through Venmo. If you haven't liked, shared, or subscribed yet, please do all of the above. And 3, right now we're actually taking sponsors for the program. If you have a product or you have a company that you would like to publicize, please reach out via the website and we will have that conversation. Again, we know there's all kinds of programs out there that you could be listening to or you could be watching, but you chose to be here with us. For that, we are grateful. And we look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.